You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing Self-Help, a Big Finish audio story starring Sasha Dhawan as the Master. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today is Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to follow The Secrets of Doctor Who in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or at the StarQuest YouTube channel, where you should hit the bell to get notifications. You can find us at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. Be sure to stick around to the end of the episode. We have more of your excellent listener feedback. And today's feedback is some deep cuts. These are some Doctor Who fans who go way back into the classic series. So stick around for that. But first, Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens in Self-Help?
This week, the Sasha Dhawan spy master arrives on a planet where he climbs a mountain and meets a spiritual leader called the Great Zenith. His plan is to kill and replace the Great Zenith and then meet some pilgrims who will take him to a planet that has an energy source called the Prothastone, which he will then steal. The Great Zenith doesn't seem too bothered by this plan, and the master does kill him, but then part of the master's mind assumes the voice of the Great Zenith and haunts him, telling him that he needs to improve himself. It turns out, though, that the master has miscalculated and he must spend a 277-year winter on the planet before the pilgrims arrive. This shakes his self-confidence, and he spends time reading the Great Zenith's writings. When the pilgrims finally do arrive, the master resumes his plan, and he slowly bonds with the pilgrims, except for their guru and leader, Christopher, who he displaces. When they finally get to the planet with the Prothastone, the pilgrims have firmly bonded with the master. In the end, it turns out that 200 years ago, the natives discovered that the Prothastone was a source of energy, and they have now drained it dry. But the master has completed his journey of self-improvement and regained his self-confidence, and he lets one of the pilgrims guess a number that will let them all live. The end.
What'd you think of this one, Jimmy?
I liked it. I thought it was okay. You know, it's not the best master story I've ever heard, but it was enjoyable.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of humor in it, and that was good.
Yeah, lots of humor.
I did like the humor. I had a hard time hearing the Sasha Dhawan, the spy master's voice in this one, as I recall it from the 13th Doctor's time. But he was kind of manic in the TV series, kind of like the John Sim master originally was.
He was more manic in the TV series than he was here. He does have craziness here. Like, he basically goes crazy reading the Great Zenith's write-ins, to where when the pilgrims finally show up, he doesn't even remember his plan at first, and he only slowly gets back into it. And he's like, "Get away from me!" He didn't want to have anything to do with the pilgrims initially.
Yeah.
But in terms of this being a master self-improvement story, I thought it worked.
Yeah. I should point out this is a fairly new story. It's only came out at the beginning of 2025, so it's new content.
Or within 2025.
Yeah. Yes. And it starts sort of in media res. It starts like in the middle of the action that we will see at the end. Like, they kind of did this whole, the whole thing where they do like, here's some action from near the end of the story, and now we'll back up to the beginning of the story. The way it begins. There's a whole sequence early on of the crashing on the planet where the Prothastone is.
Oh,
okay.
That
it starts with.
Yeah.
I was a little confused by that at first. Again, when it's just audio only and you don't have the visual cues, I sometimes have trouble following it like that. But yeah, it was fun. Like the meeting when he first meets Zenith. Zenith is funny. Because he climbs the mountain.
I like the first interaction they have. The master gets to the top of the mountain and he confronts the Great Zenith. Who, nice trait name, by the way. He lives at the zenith of a mountain, and he's a spiritual leader. So he's at the zenith of spirituality or something. And he talks to the Great Zenith, and the Great Zenith doesn't answer. And he says, "Oh, no, you haven't taken a vow of silence, have you?" And finally, the Great Zenith says, "Oh, no, I had my mouth full."
Or he asks him, "Are you Zenith?" "Oh, no, he's on the next mountain over."
Yeah.
I climbed up here for nothing. He's like, just kidding. That was good. And it was also funny. the meta theming of this is about Christopher has taken Zenith's writings and turned them into a self-help manual, and it's kind of like you see maybe like Kabbalah, the Jewish writings, the Jewish esoteric writings, kind of some people turning them into a self-help manual for moderns, stripping them from their origins. And it kind of feels like that's what Christopher has done with Zenith's writings, especially when he still thinks the master is Zenith. He disagrees with what Zenith's interpretation of his own writings is. I thought that was a kind of interesting.
Yeah, he's marketing it, and Christopher comes across as a modern pop culture guru who is up on modern marketing techniques. So he's called his self-help course the Christopher Zenith Wellness Course. And he explains to the master in terms of why it's the Christopher Zenith Wellness Course. It's purely alphabetical order.
Of course. Purely, yes. So the master has this scheme he mentioned to steal the Protha stone. Protha, I think is
Protha, yeah. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, and it's a this fabled relic from the mystical city on Ataraxia, and then it turns out like, oh yeah, we thought that was a great energy source, so we just sucked that dry. Like it was kind of a letdown at the end, like, oh
yeah, you're kind of jumping way to the end, but yeah, when they get to the Mystic City, it's like, wow, the Mystic City is kind of a dump.
right. But it's sort of like this whole thing is built around this scheme because the master's always scheming for one thing or another. And so he's built this whole thing around this scheme that eventually turns out to just fizzle, almost literally.
Yeah, because he made a mistake in his calculations and failed to account for the 277-year winter that he was going to have to spend there. And that's what allowed everything to go south. And as the master, he initially has great difficulty admitting he might have made a mistake.
Right. Why doesn't he have a TARDIS? I forget. Did he explain that?
He doesn't. They don't cover it here.
Okay.
But he is having a kind of identity crisis, in part not only based on the fact he did make a mistake, which he eventually has to confront, but he's also got trauma from his most recent regenerations, which actually the pilgrims help him when they're on the spaceship go into the world with the Protha Stone. Christopher gets the master to participate in their group therapy sessions, and it's all very heavily larded up with self-help psychobabble.
Yeah.
But he gets he invites the master to have a conversation with himself to bring out his inner trauma. And eventually the master does, and he's like, he eventually has a moving moment where he like starts crying, is, why did you stab me in the back? And he's referring to when the John Sims master stabbed Missy in the back.
Right.
And that's his inner trauma, which gets portrayed in psychobabble terms as that was self-betrayal. And I'm constantly sabotaging myself.
Right. The circle of healing, they were calling it. The group of pilgrims, self-help folks they were very amusing. You have Garf, Leslie, and Scylla, and they're all sort of archetypes.
And Scylla in particular, the master takes an immediate like to, and because she explains that she's gone on this journey of self-discovery because her husband recently died, and now she wants to find out who she is. And the master is immediately convinced that she killed her husband.
Yes.
And he keeps needling her about this, and she keeps resisting. And at first she's extremely indignant and insulted, and even Christopher has to take the master aside and warn him that you're kind of being off-putting to my pilgrims. But eventually Scylla and the master start bonding, and she starts cracking up, and eventually she admits she did kill her husband, strychnine over a 3-month period.
guess it takes one to know one. Yeah, there's a couple of really great moments. Where they're in the healing circle and they say to him, Zen, because they're still calling him Zen. We promise you nothing you tell us will ever go beyond the four of us. And the master says, well, to be fair, that is an accurate statement. And
because he's planning on killing them all. Yeah.
And then there was a great Monty Python reference. I don't know if you caught it. I did spend some time as a wizened husk. I see. I got better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I caught that.
I got better. And then Christopher tells him, maybe he's the man he's supposed to be at this time. And he's saying to himself, says to him, you have to trust in your own unpredictability. That's it. I'm not like the others, not the old beardy one or the bald one or skeletal or silver fox. Maybe I'm the chaotic one. And so he's naming off all the previous versions of the master, or some of them anyway. Which one was the bald one?
It's a Big Finish character.
Okay.
It's a Big Finish version of the master that hasn't appeared on TV.
So, Silver Fox is probably the first one.
Actually, that might be a reference to the Bruce Master, but not sure.
Okay. Yeah, Skeletal. We know.
Yeah, that's the
Burned Master.
Yeah. The two actors played him.
That's right. Beaver.
Christopher Beavers.
It doesn't matter. So, and eventually he has another. Is it another miscalculation that leads to the crash on Ataraxia?
No, he plans the crash. That's part of his plan, is to crash the ship into the planet with the Prothostone. And as soon as he gets back on track with his plan, and they get him on the ship, he programs the ship to crash. But he then, by the time they arrive, and he plans it to crash at a specific time, which is 8.6 point purple/1.
Right.
And when they get to the planet, he's reformed enough. He doesn't want to crash the ship, but he tries to turn the dial to cause it not to crash, or not to crash in the same way. But he's been participating in these self-help rituals, and his hands are covered in massage oil. and then when other people try to turn the dial for him, now the dial is covered with the massage oil from his hands.
Right. They can't fix it. But eventually, like, everyone else was.
And so they start chanting, which is a running gag on this, because anytime there's a problem, will chanting help? And since they can't get the dial to turn, they figure, why not? Let's just chant.
And they can't hurt. So, and when they crashed, like, everyone else was originally supposed to die in the crash. I mean, that was his plan. But everyone survives in this, and so they're far from the city, and so they have to hike through the wilderness, and that's kind of a funny comedy of errors, because first, everyone is now following the master / Zenith.
Yeah, he's totally displaced Christopher at this point, and now Christopher is the only one who didn't like him. Right,
and he's kind of gets mad, and Christopher ends up having all sorts of bad things happen to him on this trek. So he finally dies, right? He
gets eaten by a native life form.
Right. So that was a funny end for him.
Earlier on, there's a couple of nice things with Christopher that I took note of. One of them is in Black Orchid, where the Fifth Doctor, Peter Davison, they take advantage of his cricket uniform, and there's a moment where he gets a sudden shock because someone refers to his cricket performance as being comparable to that of the master. And he's like, what? And it's like, no, the master is a nickname of a famous cricket player.
Right.
And here we have something similar where even though the master is pretending to be the great Zenith, Christopher at one point is buttering him up and says, well, you're still the master after all. And the what? And it's, you're the great Zenith. And then in the It Takes One to Know One vein, Chris is talking to him, and it's like, you didn't say yes to this trip for altruistic reasons. You wanted to get off of that mountain. So Christopher knows that much of what he's up to.
You can't con a con man. And
yeah,
Christopher's clearly, he's, you know, a self-help guru. He's a con man. He's swindling these poor folks. So yeah. And you mentioned in your recap how the master, almost keep saying the doctor, the master essentially uses random chance to decide whether to kill everyone else or not.
He does this weird thing at the end. He says, I'm going to think of a number from 1 to 10, odd or even, name one. And Garf, one of the pilgrims who has survived, says odd, or guesses 1, and the master says yes, it was odd, so you all get to live. Mm-hmm. And that's just kind of a weird way to do it. I mean, a 1 to 10 chance, which you then convert to an odd even, which is a 50% chance.
Picking up 0 or 1.
Yeah.
White or black. Like,
yeah.
Make it a
I guess they could be trying to say the master thought better and wanted to make it easier for them to live, but it's just kind of clunky writing. But then they have a great bit of write-in where the master is getting a taxi to the spaceport, and as he's leaving, he tells the pilgrims, just go ahead in all your beliefs and prove to me that I am not mistaken in mine. Which is a direct lift from the first Doctor when he left Susan behind.
Right.
And then he says, oh, and my name isn't Zenith. Call me Master.
Right. That's a classic Master reveal. You know, the Master of the...
I also like a line towards the end where he says, as a wise man I once killed told me, I was better off looking within.
The modern, you know, the new Who Masters versus the old Who Masters, the new Who Masters just always tended to be chaos, like chaotic, much different from the original. You know, original classic Masters, of all of them, maybe apart from the Burnt Masters, tended to be, they were evil, but they weren't like chaotic, you know, random. They really upped that.
Yeah, the chaos factor.
Ever since the John Sim Crazy Master.
Yeah. The original master, Roger Delgado, was not purely bad. He was not crazy.
Right.
But he was not purely bad. I mean, he at one point offers to co-rule the galaxy with the Doctor and tells the Doctor, you know, I've got all this power for us. You could use it for good. You know, and that's similar to something Missy later does. But Missy has much more chaos in her than Roger Delgado did.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you had
the Anthony Ainley Master, who was the longest running one. He was just a mustache twirling villain. He was the most evil.
Right. Yeah, the Delgado Master was a lot like, you know, in the meddling monk or the War Master, you know, the War Chief. You know, they weren't like completely bad, but they were rogues. They were scoundrels.
Yeah,
they weren't, you know, villains.
And it's good you mentioned the War Master, the War Chief. I'm sorry. There's a difference between the War Master and the War Chief.
Right.
We now have confirmation, effectively, that the War Chief from the War Games was an early incarnation of the Master before Roger Delgado.
Right. That's true. That's right. We did get that. I forgot about that.
The War Master is Derek Jacobi.
Right. So yeah, and even the War Master is an example of a transitional master who wasn't, you know, scene chewing crazy.
No, he was one of the better masters. In fact, Big Finish has a whole series about him where they exploit as a plot point the fact he's not entirely bad.
Interesting.
And he's definitely not crazy.
Right. Yeah, it's something bad happened to the John Sim Master, and it was the drum beat thing in that the heartbeat.
Yeah.
Right.
They also have two incarnations of the Master that are just Big Finish. One of them is the bald one that gets referred to here, and the other is a character known as the Lumiat. because in Big Finish, they decided to explore the trajectory that the Master was on from John Sim to Missy, who reforms and at the end of her time has chosen to stand with the Doctor. But then the John Sim Master kills her. And the last thing on her mind is standing with the Doctor. And usually the last thing on your mind affects your next regeneration. Mm-hmm. So they have Missy regenerate into another female Master who is good, who is called the Lumiat, and does not approve of many of her previous incarnations actions, and then the Lumiat regenerates into the Sasha Dhawan Master.
Oh, interesting. The whole idea, like the total personality changes, it's an odd thing, like this Gallifreyan thing, mm-hmm. Of that someone would change so much. It just, in this regeneration, they're essentially not really the same person. They have the memories, but they're not really the same person.
No, well, it's a traumatic event. Imagine someone, has brain surgery and they come back with a somewhat different personality.
Yeah. Like people get the brain injury and they start speaking with a British accent there. That whole thing. Yeah.
Or an American one if you're the Bruce Master.
Right. That's right. From the Eighth Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Any other notes on this story, Jimmy?
Oh, let me take a look. I noted a lot of little small things, but I think I've hit the big ones.
Okay. Let's move on to our feedback. And this feedback comes from our recent discussion of the Fourth Doctor story, Full Circle. The first one comes from Stotts42 on YouTube, which is Stotts was the name of a character in the Fifth Doctor story we did after that, The Caves of Androzani, but this is not that Stotts. Anyway, he says, I don't recall it ever being mentioned that E-Space was considered a parallel universe. At one point, it was either the Doctor or Romana that stated it was a much smaller universe than our own N-Space, which always made me wonder why Elzarius had the same galactic coordinates as Gallifrey. If it was indeed a smaller area of space, surely it would have a different designation. The image translators were an interesting add as well. Back in the early days of having a VCR, I watched this one a lot. The Marshmen were a great design. The spiders, not so much. I think I prefer the ones in Planet of the Spiders.
Mm-hmm. So whether you describe E-Space as a parallel universe or a pocket dimension, I think is a matter of semantics. It depends on how you are using the terms. Mm-hmm. Any universe that is not part of our universe, I think, can be described as a parallel universe. That doesn't imply anything about how big or small it is. In terms of Alzarius having the same coordinates, but with some negative factors as Gallifrey, it's going to depend on how the pocket dimension maps onto our universe in space. So there may be a central point, which is kind of the same for both of them, but the pocket dimension may not stretch as far out as the boundaries of our universe, but it may overlap in part where Gallifrey is.
Yeah, it sort of depends on how your coordinate system works.
Mm-hmm.
Just, whether that. Yeah. Very good. And then Ground Squirrel 123 writes on YouTube, in 1972, Gene Wolfe, an American Catholic speculative fiction author, most well known for The Book of the New Sun, published an excellent series of 3 linked novellas that were published together in a book titled The Fifth Hand of Cerberus. They're set on binary planets inhabited by human colonists. One of the questions involved in all 3 stories is what happened to the Abos, the low-technology species that was supposedly native to one of the planets before the human colonists arrived. Several hypotheses are presented in the book. They're a myth and never existed, the humans outcompeted them and they went extinct, etc. But one idea that is suggested is that they were shapeshifters who wiped out the human colonists on one or both planets and then became them, forgetting who they originally were. I don't want to spoil anything, but as is typical of Wolfe, the stories make heavy use of unreliable narrators and leave few definitive answers. When I watched this episode, the fifth head of Cerberus came to mind, and I wondered if one of the writers got the idea from Wolfe.
It's an interesting idea. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to disclose any information on that.
Are you? What do they call them? One of the guys that were in charge. I forget what they called them. The keepers of the knowledge. But
the system files.
Yes, the system files. The science fiction community tends to recycle.
Borrow.
Yeah, borrow good ideas. That's a good way of putting it. So I wouldn't be surprised if they said, "Oh, that was an interesting idea. Let's use it in an episode." That's for sure. Well, thank you both for your feedback. We really appreciate it. Now we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Sandra S., Stephen R., Father Mike S., Rick S., and Alex C. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us this time. We'd love to know what you think of Self-Help, this Big Finish audio story about the Master. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com, or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. You can also watch The Secrets of Doctor Who on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia, where you can leave a comment, like and subscribe, and make sure to hit the bell to get notifications of new episodes. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the 8th Doctor story, Relative Dimensions. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Tom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest, and remember, it's no good using external goals to avoid the true challenge, acquiring self-knowledge.